Hello, and welcome to the month of May. Anyone who takes a look at our district calendar can see that May is filled with so many events that happen throughout the district in each and every school. For example, our concerts, our PTA meetings, our field days, the list goes on and on. But for us, the most important date in May is actually our district budget vote, which this year takes place on Tuesday, May 16th. I chose to focus my video presentation today solely on the topic of the budget. And to do that, I've invited my Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations, Mr. Christopher Van Cott, who really is the chief person in charge of organizing our budget, putting it together, informing people about what takes part in the budget process, and really is the one that then ultimately acts on that budget. So I am thrilled to have him join me today, and we're hoping we can answer a few questions that will help the public understand fully what our budget is and why we so desperately hope that you will be able to come out on May 16th to support those efforts. So Mr. Van Cott, welcome. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So let's start with sort of the basics. We know that there are two parts to a budget, an expense and a revenue budget. The expense budget really speaks to the things that we as a school district believe need to be in that budget to support our ongoing efforts to educate all of our students. So can you talk just a little bit about what our proposed expenditure budget entails?
Sure. We are required by the State Education Department to present our budget in what's called a three-part format, and those three parts are the program, administrative, and capital. In the program component, it contains expenditures such as our teachers, our athletics, special education, transportation. Our capital component includes buildings and grounds, utilities and debt service, and our administrative component includes things like our audit fees, legal, operation of the school board, and other central administrative expenses. On a budget-to-budget basis this year, our budget is approximately $150.1 million, which represents a 1.97% increase. And I'm very proud that we were able to come in as low as we were while we were able to add a couple of new things to the 2017-18 proposed budget, which includes the addition of a new high school business educator, which will also be used here at the high school, as well as Castleton Academy. Secondly, we are repurposing some dollars, or repurposing a space here at the high school. So we're setting aside some dollars to repurpose that space dedicated to the high school drama program. And we are also contracting for additional buses to provide service to some of our special education students.
So in order to make that happen, and we know those are all great things for our school community, we obviously had to look at places that we were going to cut. So can you talk a little bit about areas that we have actually reduced our expenses?
Sure, there are three that I can particularly highlight. One is we offered a very successful retirement incentive, which saved the district a tremendous amount of money. The second area is we looked at renegotiating our copy machine leases, which is saving money district-wide. And third and finally, and one that I'm probably really proud of, is the addition of implementing a green initiative, which involves using gas to heat our building as opposed to oil. We have a multi-year capital improvement plan to put dual fuel capabilities in each of our buildings, and as a result of that, we are able to heat the buildings with gas, which is less expensive than oil.
So thank you for that, Mr. Van Cott, and certainly I hope that the community fully understands that to get to that place, it's not something that can happen with a couple of months conversation. Building a budget is really a 12-month process, and in fact, from the day that we hopefully have a successfully passed budget, we're already beginning to plan for the subsequent school year. So that's the expenditure budget, which you've already said is increasing by 1.97%, and we are very proud of that number. But of course, that has to be offset by how you're going to pay for it, the revenue budget. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and what that will look like to our taxpayers?
Sure. There are really three primary sources of revenue, or how we're going to fund the operation. The first is the property tax levy, which represents about 78% of our funding. About 12% is state aid. And the third and final category is other, which includes our DACA program, which really is a self-sustaining program, pilot payments, reimbursable billings, or interest earnings. So that's really the funding profile. Specifically, when you talk about the property tax levy, since it is the most significant source of funding for us, that's really where the tax cap comes into play.
Okay.
So what the tax cap was something that was put into place about 6 years ago, and what it does is it restricts the growth of your property tax levy. And there's a certain formula that every school district and municipality have to complete to determine what your tax cap is going to be. And when you populate that formula with Oceanside specific data, our allowable tax cap for the 2017-18 school year was 2.15%. And our board decided very early on in the budget development process to stay at that cap. And as long as we stay at that cap, it will require just a simple majority to pass the budget.
So you did a great job, Mr. Van Cott, in explaining the tax cap, which can be a very complicated concept. But I do also know that the Board of Education, since its inception, has been very firm about wanting to stay within the tax cap. But what does tend to happen is that our taxpayers then hear one thing from us in terms of the tax cap, and then they get their tax bills. And the two just don't correlate. So can you explain a little bit about why that would be confusing to them just in terms of what the reality is and what those numbers really actually mean? And we understand fully why it's so confusing to them. Can you talk a little bit about why there's that discrepancy and why it definitely is confusing to our taxpayers?
And I understand why it is. It really has, the tax cap itself has been publicized as a 2% tax cap. So when someone opens up a tax bill, they'll expect it to say, hey, it should be 2% or whatever the district said it was going to be. The truth is the cap is on the district's tax levy, and the tax levy is one of 3 components to determine a tax rate. And the tax rate is what's set by Nassau County. It includes other variables such as adjusted base proportions as well as assessed values, which the school district itself, as you know, does not control. There's only one piece of that formula we do control, and that's the tax levy. So if there are changes within the adjusted base proportions or changes within an individual's assessment on their home, it could change the amount of their tax bill.
So the other piece of that, and that's a great explanation, is also, the issue around state aid. And very simply, the more state aid we would get, the less we would have to ask of our taxpayers. So there's that balancing act all the time with that. And we are fortunate here in Oceanside, we do get state aid, and this year there was a slight increase to what was the original governor's proposal. But we are still, as a district, as is true of all the districts in New York State, not at the level even that we were at a number of years ago. We've actually have a decrease in the amount of aid we've gotten since 5, 6, 7 years ago. Little by slowly, the amount has grown year to year, but it's still at a deficit from where we were. And I don't know that the public fully understands that as well, that really does become a huge piece of what we need to offset the effects on our taxpayers, because that really has and continues to be a goal of ours and certainly a goal of our Board of Education, while simultaneously building and sustaining amazing programs for all of our kids. The other piece of the budget vote on May 16th does have to do with Board of Education trustee elections. I will report that we have 3 current board members who will be running for re-election unopposed. That's Ms. Sandy Scholl, Mr. Don Maresca, and Ms. Mary Jane McGrath Mulhern. So please keep in mind as well that these 3 incumbent board trustees will be running for re-election. At the end of the day, we need you to come out and support this budget. I will say that an uncontested board election worries me because it tends to lead to an apathetic vote. But as our district clerk likes to say, every single vote counts and every vote is counted. So please, we ask you to mark that date on your calendar and be sure that you get out to voice your decision-making on that budget. We took a few minutes. It's very hard to explain all of this in that amount of time. I can say that Mr. Van Cott and his team have gone to every PTA meeting. There is going to be a budget hearing on May 3rd if you would like further information or to have some questions answered. We are always available by email or phone should you have any specific questions, and all of the presentations that we've made throughout this process are available on our district website. So thank you so much, Mr. Van Cott. It also happens to be incredibly timely because this is also the month that I get the pleasure and the honor of recommending you for tenure as the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations here in Oceanside. And I know that I can speak for everyone, the Board of Education and any member of the team that's had the pleasure of working with you, that we are in awe of what you bring to the table, how you present yourself, the knowledge that you have, the expertise that you have, and it really is a tremendous asset to the Oceanside schools to have someone like you in the role that you have. So in advance of the tenure recommendation, I congratulate you, and I certainly acknowledge and thank you for all you've done for me as a member of my team, and look forward to future years together in the Oceanside schools.
Thank you very much.
Again, Tuesday, May 16th, please exercise your right to vote. Thank you. Have a great month.